Good rainy, windy morning, everybody. Welcome to our third web talk of 2021. I'm in the CAD's office in Sacramento because power is out at my house. So I am assuming since you're here, you're safe and all is well where you are working or where you are living. So again, welcome. I'm Lydia Miselides, the Executive Director of the Alliance for Leadership in Education, and have been your host for these weekly web talks since early April. It's great to see almost 500 people registered for this webinar. So that is a new record for these web talks. We know you are thirsting for accurate and up-to-minute information about COVID, and our goal is always to deliver that to you. As always, as you know, our format is listen only. The session is being recorded, and you'll be able to access it from the CAD's website for later listening or viewing. And you can feel free to share with your staff, team members who are not able to be with us live today. And thank you, as always, to Pam and Danielle and Connie, the CAD's team, for their behind-the-scenes support. You will have received an email this morning from Pam containing the PowerPoint presentation. You can also download it directly from the GoToWebinar control panel to the right of your screen. And do please also use the question box to enter your questions or comments as we go through the webinar. I would suggest holding off just a little bit because our featured presenter today is going to cover a lot of material, and I can tell from the questions that came in advance that many of them will be answered during the course of our approximately 15-minute presentation, and we will have time for questions at the end. It has been now 319 days since our governor issued the first shelter-in-place order in response to the pandemic, and it's been only 3 days since he lifted the second order, asking us all to stay at home. Now, that order is the statewide order. Of course, we still have regional tiers, and everyone should be attentive to those regional tiers and what that means for your community and your moving about the community. The virus does continue to rage across our state, but it appears the surge is beginning to ease just a little bit, but we cannot let our guard down one moment. Of course, vaccines are getting into people's arms. That's been fantastic news. We've reported on this the last couple of web talks. We'll continue to give you updates on that. Today is our 40th web talk. We are very grateful to the Archstone Foundation, as always, for the funding to make these weekly webinars possible since May of 2020. And I do see that they are in the audience with us today. So welcome. Next slide. And I also am grateful for and want to acknowledge the members of the CAD's ALE Vision team. This includes our Department of Aging colleagues. They continue to meet weekly, and we are now focusing on how the heck to get you all back to in-center services. It's a little more complicated than you might imagine, but there will be some guidance coming out in the next few months. We are working on that right now. Department of Aging is leading the effort, and our managed care partners and other state partners will be invited to participate and join in to add their expertise to the conversation. And we'll give you a progress report right now. We're thinking mid to late February, we'll have a webinar devoted entirely to this subject matter. Next slide. Last week's webinar was all about the state budget and the master plan for aging. 4.7 on your scoring. Thank you, everyone who submits a survey. I read every single comment that comes in, so please take this opportunity after the webinar to complete the survey. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to read some of the comments today, but you can see them here and read them at your leisure. Next slide. Today's webinar will provide you with information about COVID-19 vaccines. We've had one webinar on this topic already, but we're going to do a little deeper dive today. And our goal is to help you feel more confident in your knowledge and your ability to answer questions that come to you from family participants, their caregivers, their family members. And I know there's a great interest in this because I received about 20 questions in advance of this talk and one just a few minutes ago. Quite a few, as I mentioned, will be answered during the presentation. While what today's session is not going to address and I want to make that clear right now, is it will not address the questions that came in and that I know all of you have about logistics. How to get vaccinations, where to get them, what's going on in every county. Today's topic does not include that, but I promise you we will be discussing it next week and in future web talks. It's important to all of us to continue that conversation and get the latest information from our state and local partners. As you know, there's been just a ever-changing, almost daily flow of new information about COVID and how you can access the vaccine. So we'll keep you posted on that. So next week we will have a session that will cover this, and we'll have some of our Vision team members describe their experiences from different counties. Next slide. It's now my pleasure to introduce Dawn Perky. Dawn, 30 years, girlfriend. It's been 30 years.
Yeah, you change your last name after 30 years. It's a challenge.
Dawn Myers. I do know that. With YOLO. And Dawn, I'm thrilled to introduce you to introduce our featured presenter today. So I'll hand the floor over to you.
Thank you so much, and good morning, everybody. I'm really happy to be here and have the privilege of introducing Dr. Kranz-Yoon. We work together here in Woodland. Here at YOLO, we are part of a large hospital system, so we've been very fortunate to, we had the vaccine offered to us in late December, and Dr. Kranz-Yoon information that you're going to see today played a key role in really helping hospital and center staff understand this vaccine. This week we have been getting our second shots. So with the second dose, for me, came a huge feeling of personal relief and honestly an unexpected feeling of empowerment, feeling of resilience, and a sense of calm. I'm really happy to be in this place. As ADHCs, as you know, we've played a key role in really ensuring the health and well-being of our participants during this pandemic. It's been difficult, we all know that. And we also know that the vaccine is our path to getting folks back to the center. So as a team and as a healthcare providers, understanding the vaccine is really key to making it a priority to get ourselves vaccinated, but also to help provide information and logistic resources to get our participants vaccinated. And to that end, you're about to learn a lot. Dr. Kranz-Yoon is part of Dignity Health Clinic here in Woodland, and she is known for her holistic approach to addressing allergies. And as one of my staff who sees her regularly says, she listens. She's absolutely creative in her approaches to the challenges that she has. So Dr. Angelina Kranz-Yoon is an allergy immunology specialist. After completing an undergraduate degree at Caltech, she graduated with honors in 2010 at USC's Keck School of Medicine. She completed her residency in immunology at Los Angeles County Hospital and then Kaiser Hospital in LA, before returning to Northern California to set up clinical practice here at Dignity Health here in Woodland. So she is supporting the work of UC Davis in conducting a phase 3 clinical trial for Novavax. So we're looking forward to hearing more about that down the road. And she works to help recruit and monitor volunteers. Novavax is showing promising results among the over 100 vaccine candidates currently in trial phases. So regardless of where you're at in terms of your decision to get the vaccine, after today, you'll have a much better grasp on the information you need to make the right decision for you. So with that, it's my honor to give you Dr. Angelina Kranz-Yoon.
Okay, hello everyone. Let me just make sure my lighting's okay here. All right, so this is, again, an honor to be invited to talk with you all today. I am quite passionate about this subject. As an allergist, we don't always get to use our immunology knowledge on a day-to-day basis, but in the past few months, this has been a tremendous asset, and I really hope to empower all of you to really understand the science behind this vaccine and to really understand how amazing it is, and hopefully answer any questions and dispel a lot of myths that are going on in our community. All right. So to outline my talk, we're going to start with just the basics of cell biology. We're all going to go back to high school, okay? Then we're going to talk about how the mRNA COVID vaccines actually work. We're going to go through some common questions, some myths, and hopefully have some time for some Q&A at the end. So first of all, cells, how do they work? So cells are the basic building blocks of all living things. The human body is composed of trillions of different cells, and they're all specialized. They have different functions. They provide structure, take in nutrients, make energy. They also contain the body's hereditary material and can make copies of themselves. So this is actually a picture of a cell that's infected with SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID. And this cell is in the process of dying because all these little tiny yellow dots here are actually COVID virus particles. And they're about to bud out. They finish replicating inside the cell, and they're about to be exploded out of this cell and go on to infect nearby cells in the body. So this just gives you a scale of a human cell in relation to the coronavirus. Cells have a lot of structure, as you may recall. So the important part is this cell or plasma membrane, which is this lipid or membrane, which is composed of fats, which goes on the outside, which again provides that barrier to the outside world. The nucleus, which is inside this kind of fortress here where your DNA is kept. You can see it's quite well protected and isolated from the cytoplasm, which is kind of the jelly inside the cell where a lot of the work gets done. So what are proteins and what do they do? So proteins are large, complex molecules that play lots of different critical roles in the body. They do most of the work in the cells. They're required for structure, function, and regulation of your body's tissues and organs. They're made up of hundreds of thousands of smaller units called amino acids, which are attached together in large chains. This is actually a picture of a spike protein on a coronavirus. So this is the coronavirus, it's lipid membrane here, just like our cells, and it has this spike protein, and it's binding to this ACE2 receptor. And in this diagram, all these little dots are the amino acids. There are 20 different types of amino acids that can be combined to make proteins, and that sequence of amino acids determines the 3D structure, which determines each protein's unique and specific function. So how does a cell make a protein? So you take your DNA, which is inside the nucleus of your cell. It is unzipped, and in a process called transcription, a message is created where a temporary little copy of whatever your cell is interested in making at that moment is turned into messenger RNA. This messenger RNA is transported to the cytoplasm. It goes out of the nucleus to the cytoplasm. It's a one-way street into the cytoplasm where a ribosome, which is a specialized enzyme, reads it in a process called translation. And it takes these translation RNAs with the amino acids, strings them together to make a protein based on that messenger RNA. Jumping to your immune system to review, your immune system is comprised of two parts. You have your innate immune system, which consists of your barriers, such as your skin, your mucosal surface, which is your eyes, nose, and mouth. It has defense mechanisms, such as the mucus in your nose or gastric acid that helps to trap or digest pathogens. And you have your immediate immune system, which consists of circulating proteins and cells in the body which directly attack the invaders, such as the complement system or macrophages. These don't have memory, but they're constantly surveilling your body to get rid of things that shouldn't be there, like bacteria and viruses. You also have your adaptive immune system, which is key in that it has memory. It's able to learn. It's composed of your T cells, which you have your helper or CD4 T cells and your killer or CD8 T cells. These sound the alarm and kill infected cells. You also have your B cells, which make antibodies, which circulate and bind to the antigens, which is whatever protein they're designed for. And then you have your, and they tag them for destruction. They kind of make them more tasty to the immune system. So vaccines use your natural adaptive immune response to give you immunity. So I like to use these little anthropomorphic cartoons. It helps me remember what all the cells do. So these are your lymphocytes, so part of your adaptive immune system. And you have your CD8 T cell, which is the killer T cell. This is kind of like the ninja going around assassinating people. This is your B cell, which is making antibodies here. And these antibodies, in the case of COVID, will bind to the spike protein on the virus before it has a chance to attach to a human cell and prevent it from entering the cell and prevent it from replicating. We also have the regulatory T cells, which are kind of like the police officers. They kind of direct traffic and they kind of direct the immune response or regulate it. And we have the CD4 T cells, which help to sound the alarm. They're kind of like the superheroes, okay? So what happens during a viral infection, okay? So the virus enters your body and the viral particle attaches to a human cell, okay? This virus gets endocytosed, so brought into the cytoplasm of your cell, and it opens up and its genetic information, usually this viral RNA, enters the cell. Your cell's machinery sees this, it doesn't differentiate it from its own RNA, so it go ahead and it makes the protein, so it transcribes it to make new proteins that will make new viruses, and it replicates that viral RNA, and it packages it, it presents these surface proteins of the virus on your cell wall, and then it creates this kind of little bleb, okay? And then once this finishes packaging and the cell dies, like in that first picture I showed you, the virus goes off to infect more cells and repeat this process. Once the cell dies, it releases up to 10,000 new viruses per cell. So if you can imagine, you have trillions of cells in your body and this is recurring over and over again, you get a lot high viral load. The immune system can recognize these viral proteins on the cell surface and can sound the alarm to try and kill this virus infected cell before it's able to finish assembling all these viruses. However, SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19, has other proteins which are being made at this time which help the virus to evade the immune system and cause many of the other symptoms that we see with COVID, the disease. So what are vaccines? So vaccines contain the same germs that cause disease, but they're killed or weakened to a point where they don't make you sick. Some vaccines contain only part of the disease germ, some contain the whole thing. And again, this vaccine stimulates your immune system to produce antibodies, exactly like you were if you were naturally exposed to the disease, except you don't actually have to get the disease first to get that immunity. And this is really what makes vaccines such powerful medicine, is unlike most medicines, they actually prevent disease instead of just treating them. This is a picture, cartoon from Edward Jenner, who was the first, developed the first vaccine against ever to smallpox in 1796. And he used cowpox, which is a similar but less deadly disease. And he used that to inoculate people against the cowpox, and then that provided immunity against smallpox. This is just an editorial cartoon which I like to show, because I think, you know, anxiety about vaccines and what they do is not a new phenomenon. It's been going on for hundreds of years since vaccines existed. All these people are worried that they're going to turn into cows, and they got the cowpox vaccine, which of course is not true. But again, vaccines are quite powerful and have been around for a long time. There are different types of vaccines. So this is, again, an example of, again, you have your virus and you have either a live attenuated, which is kind of a weakened, virus or bacteria where it can't cause the full disease, but it can still cause an immune response. You have your inactivated, such as your influenza, which is basically, it's grown up even more. You have your subunit, which are the different little protein particles, such as your pneumococcal vaccine. And then you have your toxoid or inactivated toxins like your tetanus or diphtheria. And now we have our mRNA vaccine. So it's a whole new type of vaccines. Currently, there are 6 main COVID-19 vaccines in development in the US. So we have our mRNA vaccines, your Moderna and your Pfizer. And then we also have these viral vector vaccines, which are also kind of, we call genetic vaccines. So it's the AstraZeneca, the J&J vaccines, and these carry the genetic instructions for your cell to make the antigen, the protein, which closely mimics a natural infection. We also have our protein-based vaccines, which is the Novavax vaccine, which is a subunit vaccine, which is a more traditional approach, where basically the protein, that spike protein, is grown up in a cell culture, and so another cell makes it, and then we purify it and use that as our vaccine. We inject that into people's arms. And just to clarify, our Novavax vaccine trial is not through UC Davis, it's actually directly through Dignity Health. We are one of the main sites for that. And if anyone in the kind of Sacramento area is interested, this is our website where you can go. We are still recruiting. We've gotten over 100 patients so far who've gotten their first dose of this Novavax vaccine. And so far, again, the data looks really good with that. It's a slower approach. It takes more time to grow that up in cell culture versus our mRNA vaccines. So how does an mRNA vaccine work? Okay, so going back to what we reviewed with the cell biology. So we have that delivery of your mRNA coded genetic information is basically your blueprint to make that spike protein in the cells. That messenger RNA is taken up by the muscle and local immune cells at the site of injection and results in protein synthesis. The mRNA stimulates the immune system to generate immune response to this viral protein because we recognize that it's not one of our proteins. And the mRNA is then quickly degraded by the cell, minutes to hours. It's gone by 24 hours in the body. It's totally gone, okay? And then the spike protein, which is what that messenger RNA encodes for, right? It's what our body's making. Production of that peaks at 48 hours. Or presence of that peaks at 48 hours, and it's gone by 72 hours in the body. So within 3 days, that protein is totally gone. I like to think of this as Snapchat for the immune system for the younger people on here. Basically, you send a message, and as soon as you read it, it's deleted, okay? It does not stick around. So this is, again, a little cartoon about how this ribosome here is reading this messenger RNA. And this came from the nucleus from our cell, and it's making this protein. And then he's like, well, that one's done. What's next? And then this guy's like, well, this one doesn't look like it came from the nucleus. And he's like, well, a job's a job. On we go. We got to make this protein. And that's exactly what this mRNA vaccine does, okay? This is actually a screenshot I took from the Pfizer EUA meeting with the FDA from December. I actually watched it in between patients, and this was directly from the director of Pfizer, and I really liked this diagram, so I'm just going to walk you through it. So this is the mode of action. This is the Pfizer vaccine candidate, and it's the same for Moderna. They have the same essentially technology. So this is your modified messenger RNA, and it's actually modified so that it just has the spike protein and then it's degraded fast, okay? It is formed in these little lipid nanoparticles, which is, again, just this kind of fats on the outside, which mimic a virus. It kind of looks like a little virus here. And then you have your messenger RNA on the inside. Because this looks kind of like a little virus and it has this, again, lipid membrane just like your cells, it's taken up by your cells. That messenger RNA is released into the cytoplasm, again, doesn't get to the nucleus. This fortress is still intact here. It's only a one-way street. Messenger RNA can come out of the nucleus, but not back in. Their ribosomes read this protein, it makes the spike protein, it processes it, and then it displays it on the cell surface because it's a surface protein, so it's like, well, that's where it needs to go on the surface. And then your CD4 helper T cells, remember your little superhero cells, they look at it, they're constantly touching other cells and saying, hey, are you one of us? Are you a human cell? You belong in this body? And when they see this signal that, oh, this is not something I recognize as one of our proteins, it sounds the alarm saying, hey, this is not one of us. We need to attack this protein and this cell that is making this protein because this is not normal. So then the CD8 or killer T cells will go ahead and kill this, this cell that is expressing the spike protein, okay? And then this helper T cell also activates the B cells to make the virus neutralizing antibodies against that spike protein. And because this mimics a natural viral infection, we actually seem to get very robust memory responses from our T and B cells who are going to wait around for the next time you get exposed to quickly get rid of any infected cells and make antibodies. So how effective are these vaccines? So every vaccine trial, every medical trial has two groups, one who gets the vaccine and one who doesn't, that's the placebo. Then they count up who gets sick in these two groups. So in total, because again, these are very similar, about 32,000 people in the clinical trials received the COVID vaccine, 19 got COVID, All were mild, none had to be hospitalized, none had to get oxygen or be intubated, all very mild symptoms. And in 32,000 people who didn't get the vaccine, 347 got COVID, including severe cases who had to be hospitalized and in fact died. So when we look at these numbers, when you do the math, it actually adds up to about 94% effectiveness at preventing COVID, or at least severe COVID that requires going to the hospital or oxygen, the things we care about, okay? Which is amazing. For example, to compare, the flu vaccine is only about 50% effective on a good year at preventing severe flu. And again, that's something we recommend routinely for everyone. And so the fact that this is 94%, that's actually way more than they were hoping for. They were aiming for about 50%. They said if it's about 50% effective, that's great, okay? But the fact that it's 94% effective is amazing. These are the actual graphs from the papers in the New England Journal of Medicine. This is from the Pfizer study, and this is from the Moderna study. And you can see they, even just at first glance, they look quite similar. So this is for Pfizer, and you can see this is days after the first dose. This is the vaccine group in red, and this is the placebo group, and they're just counting up the number of cases as time goes on. And you can see after about a week or two, the groups seem to split off, right? Where again, the vaccine group, really few of them get symptomatic COVID. Again, not severe, it's just all mild. And then in this group, way more people start to get, and this is where we get that 94% effectiveness. Same with the Moderna vaccine. You can see this is the people who got the vaccine, this is the people who did not get the vaccine. And you can say around, this is the first dose and this is the second dose. So around after the second dose, we really see that significant difference in cases. So number one question is, was it rushed? I mean, it's been about a year since we've learned about COVID in general. And this was the fastest vaccine development in the history of the world because a bunch of science went on for years behind the scenes, and then a bunch of good things happened all at once, okay? Our knowledge of gene sequencing is way better than even a few years ago. They were able to figure out the SARS-CoV-2 virus's genetic code within a few days. Scientists have been studying other coronaviruses like the original SARS and MERS behind the scenes for years, so we knew where we needed to target to make an effective vaccine. They've also been studying mRNA vaccines behind the scenes for years as well. And we figured out how to have the infrastructure to have really great clinical trials and enroll lots of people, especially with, again, computers, all this stuff really helps. And the other fact that they were able to get this done so quickly is that there was just so much COVID going around that they were able to get enough cases to make it see that significant difference in between the two groups fast, okay? There was also a ton of money poured into this effort, both through the government, charities, all these lots and lots of money got poured into this to make it faster. They also started manufacturing and ramping up production way before we would usually see that done in a clinical trial. So this is the kind of traditional paradigm where it would take multiple years to have drug development. So you kind of, you do your science, you're like, oh, this is like a good target. And then you're like, well, we kind of see, we make a little bit of it, we see if it's safe in humans, that's their phase 1. Phase 2 is your kind of dose range efficacy. So you want a high dose, low dose, medium dose, what's going to be most effective. And then phase 3 is once you have that effective dose, then you go on to enroll, a couple thousand people to see if there's a significant difference. And then once that's done over a couple of years, then you get your licensure and then you ramp up your manufacturing. And this can take, 10 years or so. However, in a pandemic, we don't have that much time. So they quickly, all these same things happen with the same amount of oversight, they were just overlapped. So they knew, again, they sequenced the genome, they had a target because they knew that, we needed to target the spike protein in a certain conformation to make an effective vaccine. They quickly went ahead and do that. They did the first, animal studies, then they did the first safety studies in humans, and they did the safety and dose selection. Once they saw it was safe, they immediately went to dose selection. And once they did that, they immediately went to the large-scale clinical trials. And the scale of these trials is actually really large compared to many medications that we give on a routine basis. And again, they ramped up manufacturing at the same exact time. So that's how we were able to get mRNA vaccines into arms in less than a year. And I think the main message is that because if you spend a ton of money, miracles can happen. And how long will it take to work once I get my vaccine? So you won't get the full protection from the mRNA vaccines until about a week after the second dose for Pfizer and about 2 weeks after the second dose for Moderna. Again, there's slight differences in the dosing and timing, and that may affect it. It's approximately about 2 weeks after your second dose, I would say, to be safe for both of them. After your first dose, you do start to get some protection about 10 days after, once that immune system starts to ramp up that response, but it's only about 50%. If you remember in those graphs at the beginning, they're pretty close together within the first couple weeks, and then they really start to see that significant difference. So you really want to get both doses, okay? And you do want to try to get both doses from the same manufacturer. We really don't have data on, what if we mix both of those together? It's probably fine, and the CDC did say it was okay if there's really no other option, but I would really recommend against that at this point because we just don't have that data. And I'm all about data, and I want to make sure that we're doing the right thing for everyone. And so by saying, yeah, it's probably okay is not really good enough, because again, these trials were quite rigorous, the science is quite rigorous, and we want to make sure everyone gets the best outcome possible. Will it hurt? What are the side effects? So again, about over 35,000 people have already received the vaccines in clinical trials, and none of them have reported any serious health problems. These started at large scale in July, and we really, if we're gonna see problems associated with the vaccine, it usually occurs within about 2 months of the vaccine, okay? We know this from prior vaccines, and this is really that time frame for any problems with the immune system. They should show at that time. They're not gonna come up years later. The side effects, which I'm sure you've heard lots about or experienced maybe firsthand at this point, they can resemble some of the symptoms of COVID-19. They generally, however, only last, 1 to 2, maybe 3 days at most, and definitely seem to be more likely after your second dose. Common ones are fatigue, headaches, fever, chills, muscle pain. I've also heard people say they have some nausea, just not feeling so good, right? You can also get a delayed rash at the vaccine site. I've had a couple consults for this actually, and this is okay, it's expected. We actually see it with a lot of childhood vaccinations, but I think for adults, we're not used to this kind of as vigorous immune response. But this is okay, it'll go away. It's a good sign that your immune system's working. And lymphadenopathies, those swollen lymph nodes in your armpit on this side where you got the shot, or in your neck on where you got that shot, that is also your immune system, just again, recruiting all those immune cells to learn about this spike protein to build a good response. So it'll go away. It's a little uncomfortable, but it will go away. But if you have something like nasal congestion or cough, that is not a side effect of this vaccine. So you should get tested for COVID, okay? And again, while these symptoms are not pleasant, and you may be out of work for a day or two and just, again, be laying on the couch, they're a good sign that your immune system is actually working and will hopefully provide some long-lasting immunity. So these are our side effects compared. I like this slide. I stole from this doctor who made it. So Shingrix is another what we call very reactogenic vaccine, where the immune system gets really excited about it and causes lots of side effects. And so when we're looking at, again, the local pain, redness, swelling at the injection site, muscle aches, which is myalgias, fatigue, headache, chills, fever, and then again, about 48% of people who get Shingrix will have one of these side effects. For Moderna, about 46% of people will have one of these side effects. And then for Pfizer, about 36% of people will have some of these side effects. And for flu, it's only about 15%. So this gives you kind of hierarchy of, what to expect. So Shingrix, I'm told, is again, not so pleasant. Again, not everyone has bad symptoms, but a lot of people do. Same with the mRNA vaccines, okay? They are very reactogenic, okay? It's not an allergic reaction. It's not that you're infected. It's just, again, it's a very potent vaccine, okay? Another question is, wow, this mRNA technology, I've never heard of it before. Has it been used before? So yes, it has. So it's actually been in development for over 30 years, using the past 50 years of immunology and cell biology research. This is Dr. Catalin Carrico. And she spent her entire career since the 1990s trying to get this mRNA technology into clinical practice, because it's actually quite difficult to achieve. And now she's with BioNTech, who works with Pfizer. And then this is Dr. Kazmikia Corbett, who's an NIH researcher. She's the scientific lead for the coronavirus vaccine program. She's been studying this for over 6 years, even before COVID came on. She was studying other coronaviruses and working on this technology, and she's the NIH helped with the Moderna vaccine. So people have been dedicating their entire lives to studying this technology. And again, this didn't just come out of nowhere, okay? It's been used for personalized cancer immunotherapy research because, again, cancer cells, as they mutate, they change some of their proteins, and your body can recognize those as foreign. And so they kind of look at those proteins to see, hey, can we boost this immune response, this internal immune response, just like with the, with this COVID vaccines, in addition to chemotherapy. And so lots of clinical trials are underway for lots of different types of cancers. And they've been looking, again, at preventing other infectious diseases, such as a rabies vaccine, which is currently in clinical trials. And they're also looking for, a universal influenza vaccine, because we don't have a super great vaccine for that. Vaccines against HIV and tuberculosis are all also at the research stage. So again, definitely has been used with lots of amazing scientists working their whole lives on this. How do I know it's safe? Well, each of the companies apply to the FDA, and their EUA, or emergency use authorization, includes 2 months of follow-up safety data from those phase 3 clinical trials, which are conducted by universities and other independent research groups. Again, some people got their shots in July, and they've been followed ever since for about 7 months with no new side effects during that time. In phase 3, again, the big scale clinical trials, again, we had tens of thousands of volunteers, which is a huge clinical trial. They've had close track of the short-term reactions and saw that they didn't change over time, they didn't last. And again, really with vaccines, you don't see reactions usually more than a few weeks after getting the vaccines. And over 19 million people in the US have gotten at least 1 dose of either of these vaccines in the past 6 weeks, and this is as of the 25th, so as of Monday. And they're continuing to monitor all these millions of people through VSafe, which is a cell phone text-based application, and VAERS, which is our vaccine adverse event reporting system. So they're closely monitoring, okay, all these millions of people. And a question that's near and dear to my heart as an allergist is, if I have allergies, should I be concerned? So definitely this has been in the news. People with severe allergies who have experienced anaphylaxis in the past should talk with their own doctor. It should be fine, okay? Generally, fewer than 1 in a million people who get other vaccines in the US will have an anaphylactic reaction, which is about 1 in 1.31 million. And in the initial clinical trials, they only saw 1 person had anaphylaxis with Pfizer and none with Moderna, interestingly. But since the EUA in December, Pfizer, in the initial 10 days of vaccinations, had what ended up being about 11.1 cases per million doses of anaphylaxis, which is, again, life-threatening allergy where you have, hives, difficulty breathing, low blood pressure. Again, these tend to occur within the first 30 minutes after your vaccine, generally within the first 15, okay? And this is why they recommend that we wait under observation at least 15 minutes for all patients. And if you have a history of anaphylaxis, you wait for 30 minutes, and I would say bring your EpiPens. I forgot to mention that Moderna, again, had just recently showed when they did the numbers, they only had 2.5 cases per million, which is about a quarter less than Pfizer. So again, as Moderna is probably getting rolled out more, there's even less chance of getting anaphylaxis with that. And we'll see over time if this Pfizer number changes, because again, this was just based on the first 10 days of vaccination. I like to say I can treat anaphylaxis, I can't treat COVID, okay? You'll feel better within an hour after your EpiPen, and I can't say the same for COVID, okay? So Why do people have reactions to the vaccines? Okay, so I like to divide it up into those kind of reactogenic side effects. So again, the kind of fevers, aches, not feeling well, you can get some racing heart. Those are what we call those reactogenic side effects. That's your immune system getting stimulated, because remember that mRNA is packaged in a lipid particle, so it crosses the membrane. And these lipid nanoparticles, even without the messenger RNA, can cause short-term reactions, okay? Because they look like a little virus or bacteria, right? And so your complement system, your macrophages, they see this and they get excited and they're like, oh, they want to destroy this and eat it. They release lots of those cytokines, which make you feel not so good, and boost that immune response, which is why they're helpful, versus the anaphylactic, okay, which is, again, the more immediate allergic reactions. We think this may be related to the polyethylene glycol, which is basically what's in Miralax, which is a common ingredient in lots of medications, but it's used to stabilize this outer lipid membrane, so it doesn't degrade as soon as it's in the bottle or as soon as it's in your arm. So I would say, if you were to have someone who had an anaphylactic reaction or something that seems similar, we would recommend checking a tryptase in the blood, which is a marker of allergic reactions, but that has to be done within 4 hours of the reaction. It's very time sensitive. And again, anaphylaxis is treatable. We treat it all the time in my allergy clinic, and it is, again, you just need to report it so we can keep track of this to the CDC. So this is the V-Safe, which after you get your vaccine, you should all get information to sign up for this. You can even just Google it, and it's super easy. You just put your phone number in, and you fill out a little survey about, which vaccine did you get, when did you get it, did you have any symptoms? And then for the first week after your vaccine, every day they actually send you a text message, say it's time for your check-in, and you go and you quickly fill out, how are you feeling today? Were you able to go to work? It's super easy. And then after the first week, they do it weekly, and then you get your second dose, and they do it again daily for a week, and then weekly after that. So they are, I'm highly encouraging everyone to sign up for it. I did it myself. It was really cool because I felt like I was really helping gather data about all these, again, side effects, I guess, these reactogenic side effects, and making sure that they're catching anything else of concern, just like they did with the anaphylaxis. So this kind of ties in with, what will happen if serious side effects come up after the vaccine is rolled out. So again, once you're reaching these kind of, almost 20 million people, there's highly likely that small, very unlikely events or adverse events may occur. So we know that with existing vaccines, including the flu shot, it rarely can cause other complications, including Guillain-Barré or seizures. Again, while it's frightening or sounds frightening, the risk is really minuscule when you compare it over the millions of people who are safely vaccinated each year. And a lot of these complications like Guillain-Barré or seizures are actually more likely to be caused by the virus itself rather than the vaccine. And so again, officials investigate these reports. Again, they get taken up by the news and get really exaggerated, and people get super worried about it. But really, these vaccines are quite safe. Again, almost 20 million people have gotten them so far in the past, month. And the only signal we saw was that anaphylaxis, which they were very transparent about, and that we're still, again, working to do the studies to figure out why we're seeing that more often than we would with other vaccines. Again, really just keep in mind that your risk of severe complications from COVID-19 is far higher than your risk of complications from the vaccine. So we've got to keep everything in perspective. I had COVID-19 already. Do I still need the vaccine? Yes, okay. It's safe and most likely beneficial, because we know that people who get COVID, while they have some immunity, it's variable. We don't know how long it lasts. There definitely have been cases of reinfection where people over, a month or so or a couple months, they get sick again. And I think it has to do again with the immune system, maybe when you actually are infected, being compromised and not being able to have this good memory response that we're seeing with these vaccines. If you've had it in the past 90 days, you are probably still protected. Most cases of reinfection are after 90 days, but we are seeing some that are a little bit sooner than that. So the current recommendation is to get the vaccine once you've recovered, you're out of isolation, and you're feeling better from your COVID infection. And a common question that we had since our spike in cases occurred right around the time we first started vaccinating people at the end of December here, if you get COVID after your first dose and before your second dose, it's the same recommendation. So as long as you're feeling better, you're no longer contagious, you're out of your 10 days after your symptoms started, and I say you're feeling 100% back to normal, you can get your vaccine, okay? If you're not feeling 100%, you should probably wait a little bit longer until your body's fully recovered. You don't need to check antibodies before vaccination, and vaccination won't cause positive COVID viral tests, okay? It won't cause positive nose swabs or PCRs. What it will cause is a positive spike protein IgG in your blood, or immunoglobulin in your blood, while a natural infection will also have a positive nucleocapsid IgG. And so when you're doing COVID antibody testing in the blood, different labs will test different parts of this. Most of them are testing nucleocapsid, and you have to ask for the spike protein specifically. This may change over time, but again, not all immuno IgG tests will test for spike protein. So if you're curious and you go to Quest and you send off your blood, it may be still negative because they're looking for that nucleocapsid, which is again that other viral protein that is not present in the vaccine. Will it work on older people? Yes. So this is really terrific that so far the data suggests that it actually has a really robust and similar response in older adults as it does in younger adults, which is terrific because a lot of vaccines don't. And a lot of questions on the new variants. This is kind of a new and evolving situation here. So far as we know, both these vaccines will work on these new variants, okay? SARS-CoV-2 is mutating slowly over time, okay? The more it replicates, the more cases we have, the more mutations we're gonna see, okay? These variants have small amino acid changes, some of which do nothing and some which can affect its function. So the UK variant has 8 amino acid changes in its spike protein. The South African variant has 10. The virologists to kind of make a distinction between these variants being variants and not new strains, which is again like with flu, like flu A or B, where they're significantly different. They appear to be more contagious based on the increased amount of virus RNA detected in people's noses, along with the significant increase in cases we've seen in the past couple months. However, the caveat to that is that the time of increased spread is likely also related to our holiday gatherings in winter. In the UK, they really didn't have any lockdowns until after Christmas almost, and people were still going out to bars and pubs and all that indoor dining was still allowed. So again, when you're gonna have more spread, you're gonna see more cases and you're gonna have more deaths. So there's some confounders there, okay? I think another reassuring thing is that your body is making many different types of anti-spike protein antibodies with the vaccine because it takes that spike protein, it kind of chops it up as part of your immune response, and it recognizes different parts of it, not just one single part, okay? So one, small amino acid change or even a couple that are not, directly next to each other will not be a problem. And the good news is that, again, just this week, Moderna confirmed on Monday that there is efficacy, their vaccine is efficacious against the UK variant, and it's the same efficacy as the original by basically antibody binding studies. But there was some decrease in effectiveness against the South African variant, but it should still be protective. It's still about 6-fold lower, but because these vaccines are so good, it's still above that kind of what we think is that protective threshold for your antibodies floating around. And with the mRNA technology, because it's pretty fast, right? Once you get a variant, you can make that mRNA and package it and have it ready to go in as little as 6 weeks. And they actually said that they're actually currently working on a booster with the mRNA of the spike from the South African variant, just in case. And they actually just started a phase 1 clinical trial using that kind of as a boost. So again, if there's significant variants, this is they're already working on it. They're being quite proactive, which is great. Should I be worried about these variants? I would say yes, just as much as you've been worried about COVID in the whole past year, okay? So we should really still do everything, social distancing, masking, taking your precautions, washing your hands, all those usual things, okay, will also stop the spread of these variants. And it's so important to protect everyone with vaccination ASAP to really stop the spread of this virus and stop the rate of mutations. What if I'm young and at low risk? Why not take my chances with COVID-19 rather than get a vaccine? You should get a vaccine, okay? COVID-19 is by far the more dangerous option. Generally, we know that people who are older, obese, have diabetes, high blood pressure, are high at risk for complications from COVID. Young people can become severely ill too. When they looked at about 3,000 people ages 18 to 34, so very young adults who were hospitalized for COVID, 20% required intensive care and 3% died. That's not a small number. And I found this interesting that during the first 5 months of the pandemic, when they had the surge kind of in New York, about 11, almost 12,000 more Americans ages 25 to 44 have died than expected in years past, an 18% increase, with about 4,000 or so, or 38% of those documented to be caused by COVID. But we may be not detecting all of those because, again, the significant increase in just deaths in young people. And really keep in mind that as many as 1 in 3 people who recover from COVID, even if they didn't have to go to the hospital, have chronic complaints, including exhaustion, difficulty breathing, racing heart, and other symptoms for months after, 6 months or so, almost a year in some patients, as we're seeing the so-called long COVID. COVID vaccines, in contrast, really have little known risks, okay? They really don't seem to cause these kind of symptoms. Again, we followed people for at least 7 months, and again, aren't seeing this. And the vaccines will likely decrease your transmission to family, friends, and other essential workers. We don't have 100% data on this, but it is encouraging. What about children? So typically, childhood vaccines are approved after being tested and shown to be safe in adults. Basically, most of the trials were on non-pregnant adults. So Pfizer and Moderna are both now studying children aged 12 and above, and AstraZeneca has been tested on children down to age 5 abroad, but not in the US. Children will definitely need to be vaccinated. Children can still get sick and get hospitalized from this virus, though less frequently than adults. And they definitely can asymptomatically or symptomatically spread the virus to other people in their family. Hopefully there will be a vaccine available for children by mid to late 2021. And there's really no reason to think these vaccines would not work in children or cause any other side effects in children because we all have the same cell biology. What about women who are pregnant or breastfeeding? It's a lot of information here, but basically, they haven't been specifically tested in pregnant or lactating women. A lot of medications aren't specifically tested in this population, which is kind of an oversight. But the ACOG, the obstetrician gynecologist, basically said they recommend offering when available, and considering, again, the level of activity of the virus in the community, it's high. Again, most healthcare workers that I know who are pregnant or lactating have gotten it because there's so much virus around right now. The vaccine is quite efficacious, so we're going to consider that. The risk and potential severity of maternal COVID, including the effects of COVID on the fetus and newborn. Again, we consider the safety. And again, while safety data on the use of these vaccines in pregnancy is not available in humans, there's really no data to show that the vaccines are harmful. And when they did animal studies, they did not see any safety signals. So there were no problems with pregnancy or the fetal development in the rat model that they used for both of these vaccines so far. So again, I think the virus itself really poses greater risk to pregnant women than the vaccine. There's definitely, we've seen increased risk of ICU admission, need for ventilation or ECMO, and death reported in pregnant women with symptomatic COVID versus women with COVID who are not pregnant. And vaccines are generally, again, recommended in pregnancy. We give Tdap all the time to prevent pertussis in newborns, which can be deadly to newborns. We just recommend that pregnant women don't get live vaccines like MMR, but both these vaccines are not live viruses. What if I'm immunocompromised? What if I have an autoimmune disease? I'm on chronic immunosuppression. It's actually safe and recommended. So The caveat is that both of the large phase 3 trials excluded people who were on long-term immunosuppression, except for some well-controlled HIV patients. But there's really no reason to think that there would be any increase in adverse events, but it just might not work quite as well. But if we're talking about it, working 70% versus 95%, that's better than 0% without a vaccine. So again, further studies are ongoing, but I'm definitely recommending that all our immunocompromised people with autoimmune diseases are getting these vaccines, because we know that they're at higher risk for having problems when they get COVID. So going on to our first myth, the myth that the mRNA alone causes side effects. This is not true. So the mRNA molecules are highly unstable. Your blood contains enzymes that degrade free-floating or unprotected RNA in minutes, because your body knows that it's not supposed to be in your blood. It's supposed to be in a cell, and if it's in your blood, it's because it's from a virus and it gets rid of it. Your skin also has RNA enzymes that degrade the RNA. And so even when you're working with these in a lab, you have to make sure you totally sterilize your work surface, because any kind of skin residue has these enzymes which can degrade this mRNA. It's so fragile. And this is why these vaccines need refrigeration and like special handling precautions. And really the only concern is that the mRNA might not actually be getting into the cell to do its job, because our bodies are so good at getting rid of this mRNA. All right, and then another myth is that mRNA changes your DNA. This is not true. So mRNA does not affect the recipient's DNA. And this is because in order to do so, the mRNA would have to convert back into DNA, enter the nucleus, and go into the DNA, which is a reversal of normal function, if you remember from the beginning of the talk, okay? That messenger RNA cannot enter the nucleus. It's a one-way street, okay? This is not a again, retrovirus like HIV or something like that is not. It is just that messenger RNA. It's the Snapchat message, okay? Another analogy is like you have a book that represents your genetic code. You scan that book in a copy machine, and then you have a bunch of papers that are an image of the original book. But the copy doesn't change the original book. It just can't, okay? And again, your cells have plenty of enzymes that will destroy this messenger RNA. And again, that messenger RNA is degraded shortly after that protein is made. It is Snapchat for your cell. Another myth is that the mRNA vaccine will give me COVID. This is also not true. The mRNA fragment causes just one part of the virus to be produced, the spike protein. So this is a diagram of your coronavirus with your spike protein and lots of other envelope proteins and again, nuclear proteins, viral RNA here, lots of different proteins that comprise this, okay? But the messenger RNA that's part of the vaccine only codes for this spike protein, okay? Which looks kind of like this, why it's called a spike. All these different little proteins here. This is the receptor binding domain, but you get the whole code. That's what your body's making, okay? It produces an immune response, but it's just a tiny part of the virus. It cannot reproduce, it cannot cause disease, and it cannot spread. This spike protein is useless without the rest of the virus, except to cause an immune response. That's it. There's no live, attenuated, or dead viruses in these mRNA vaccines. You cannot contract COVID-19 from these vaccines. Another myth is that mRNA will harm the fetus during pregnancy. It's not true. So the cell biology of the fetus, again, is similar to the ones in adults, okay? The mRNA fragment is probably not going to go all the way into the circulation and cross the blood placental barrier and get into the fetus. Again, it's really local. It's in your arm. It's in those local cells, okay? And even if it somehow made it all the way down to the placenta and into the fetus, it's not going to enter the nucleus of the cell and change the fetal DNA. It's impossible, okay? Because that mRNA functions exactly the same in a fetus and adults. We're all humans. Another myth, which is becoming increasingly popular, unfortunately, is that the mRNA vaccine will cause infertility. This is not true. So there was a claim started by two people who decided to put their thoughts on social media that there's a protein subunit on the spike protein that is homologous or similar to the synectin-1 protein, which basically causes placental development, okay, or assists with that. And the facts are that there are basically 5 amino acids that are similar between the two proteins out of 1,237 amino acids in the spike protein. There is simply no evidence that there's any cross-reactivity between these two proteins, and this sequence is way too short for the immune system to meaningfully confuse it with placental proteins, okay? You usually need about 10 to 20 amino acids in the same kind of chain to make that kind of distinction of a cross-reactivity, but only 5 is way too small, okay? There's really not plausible that one small part of these proteins would be cross-reactive. And for an example, I thought was interesting that hemoglobin, so your protein, your red blood cells that carries oxygen, shares 6 amino acids with the spike protein. So it has even more than the synuclein-1, and we don't see people just, having hemolysis or their immune system attacking all their red blood cells because of cross-reactivity. That doesn't happen. So this is not happening, okay? 23 women who were vaccinated in the Pfizer clinical trial became pregnant after the vaccinations, and there really are no increased reports of miscarriages in women diagnosed with COVID-19 in early pregnancy, though we do, again, see when they have COVID later in pregnancy, they are higher risk of complications. Another fun myth is that mRNA vaccines are using hydrogel nanotechnology to introduce microchips into the human body. Not true. There are no microchips in these vaccines, okay? Hydrogel nanotechnology refers to the lipid nanoparticles, which encase the mRNA. So lipid means fat, nano means very, very small, and particle means small sphere, okay? The microchips would have to be so small, they wouldn't work, okay? It's impossible. Basically, these are like, I like to think of them like oil drops in water, okay? So you have your mRNA, they put their lipid membranes, and it kind of scoops up some of this mRNA into these little tiny oil droplets, okay? And there's no way that a microchip, even the tiniest one invented, would fit in there. So so no one's going to track you or give a 5G transmitter in your arm. And I don't know, it'd be pretty cool to have my own Wi-Fi all the time wherever I went. So that might not be such a bad thing. But again, this is impossible, okay? And then the million-dollar question is, if I've been vaccinated, will I still need to wear a mask? And the answer is yes, but not forever, okay? So the vaccines appear to be enough protection to keep the vaccinated person from getting ill, but we don't know if it's enough to really prevent the virus from growing locally in your nose and to be sneezed out or breathed out and be able to transmit to others, even though the antibodies in the rest of your blood and the rest of your body are preventing you from getting sick, okay? The clinical trials just weren't designed to look for that. They were designed to see if you got sick, not whether you spread it, okay? So we know, again, it does prevent you from getting sick, but we don't know about the spreading. So based on the studies of the flu vaccine and even patients infected with COVID-19, I think we're hopeful that vaccinated people actually won't spread the virus, but we don't know for sure. Okay, we need to do more research. There was some preliminary kind of Moderna data, looking at this question in between the first and second dose, and it did seem to be that they didn't have much virus in their nose. But this is very preliminary, and again, I think they're kind of looking more to address this question in the next few months. In the meantime, everyone, including vaccinated people, will need to think of yourselves, again, possible silent spreaders and keep wearing a mask, just like you've been doing for the past 9 months, okay? So things aren't changing yet, but again, maybe in the future. The real goal here is what we call community immunity, okay? We used to call it herd immunity, but I like community better because we're not a herd, we're a community, right? So when enough people in a community are vaccinated, the whole community, including those who are not vaccinated, are protected against the disease, okay? It's important because not everyone can get vaccinated. Not everyone has a great response to vaccination, okay? Or they're too young, or, we don't know yet. But again, the number of vaccinated individuals must be great enough for the community protection to occur. We think this is probably about 75 to 80% of people in our community need to be vaccinated to get this community immunity, okay? But we're not for certain, it's all kind of speculation. I think higher the better, okay? And the most successful example of community immunity is polio. So polio was one of the most feared diseases in the US, okay? In the 30s, 40s, and 50s, polio outbreaks cause more than 15,000 cases of paralysis in children each year. And so you know, mothers were terrified that their children would be paralyzed or worse, you know, during their childhood. So any little stumble would cause so much anxiety, just like a little cough does today, right? That, oh my gosh, my kid might have polio, they might stop breathing, they might have to live their entire life on an iron lung, on a ventilator, lying on their back, you know, not being able to move their arms or legs or even breathe for themselves. That's a horrible, terrifying disease. And following introduction of the vaccines in the 1950s and early 60s, the number of polio cases fell rapidly to less than 100 in the late 60s and fewer than 10 in the 1970s, because parents were so keen to get the vaccines that people were lined up around the block, right, waiting for hours to get this their sugar cube or their vaccines. And it was truly amazing because thanks to the successful vaccination program, the United States has been polio-free since 1979. And it is, again, truly a successful example of community immunity and something to aspire to. So it's up to you if you want to be a COVID pioneer, okay, and get your mRNA vaccines. But I just want to keep in mind, again, that mRNA COVID vaccines appear to be incredibly safe and effective. They've been developed using a transparent, rigorous process. And again, its intermediate or EUA data really shows no significant major side effects. The 2 vaccine trials consisted about 74,000 participants, and now we have an additional 19 million Americans who have gotten vaccinated in the past month or so. And the FDA and CDC are going to really continue to monitor safety as time goes on. And we got to really remember and keep this in context, the fear of the unknown about these vaccines versus what's going on. So 1 in 900 Americans has died in the past year due to COVID-19. So if you can imagine, you know, your high school, if you had 1,000 people there, right, you know, at least one of those people has died because of COVID-19. As of earlier this week, there was 417,936 deaths in the past year. And this is, you know, more than all of World War II. This is a huge number of people who have, you know, lives, families, loved ones, friends who are no longer with us because of this deadly disease. Globally, and this struck me as well because when I first started doing these presentations a month ago, it was at 1.7 million deaths, and now it's at 2.14 million deaths globally. That's a huge number of people, okay? And we've all been suffering through economic, social, and mental health loss, which is really historic. And a successful and widely adopted vaccine is really our best chance to return to a normal life. So I just want to show that this is me getting my shot. It's actually the day of my first presentation. I was called up to our hospital and got my vaccine, and now I got my second. I'm fully vaccinated. I definitely had some side effects. I did not feel so well. It was kind of achy, you know, tired. But I'm happy to report my antibodies. Again, I had a good, vigorous response, so I'm sure that they're protective now. And I encourage you to check out social media with the hashtag This Is Our Shot, with a lot of other doctors and nurses sharing their stories about getting their COVID vaccines. And so with that, I just want to make sure, you know, remember, we got to vaccinate for victory here against COVID-19. And I'll open it up for questions. See. Oh, I think you're still muted.
I want to thank you. And I want to assure our listening audience that unlike biology class that some of us enjoyed, some of us probably did not, there will be no examination after this lecture. All right, but I hope everyone was taking notes. Remember, this is recorded and you may want to listen to it again because it's jam-packed with great information. So we're going to do sort of lightning round questions now. Are you ready?
Okay.
All right. I think you addressed this already. Do we need to get the vaccine every year?
So we don't know how long immunity lasts at this point because there hasn't been enough time. There's a lot of good signals that the immunity should last, you know, at least a year or two or even longer, okay? So there, again, we're continuing to monitor, and then the scientists are still kind of looking at that. The clinical trials will be ongoing for at least 2 years, so the people who signed up for that are going to be, you know, they're going to keep close tabs on them. And then I think the question really is, again, again, if variants, right? If there's significant variants that come up, we may need to get these kind of boosters every year or what have you. It just kind of depends at this point. So I'd be happy to get this every year like a flu vaccine. Again, if we need to, that we might have to, but there's some encouraging signs that the immunity actually may last longer than that, which would be terrific. So we'll find out.
Okay, now there's a few questions that have to do with sort of comorbidities and some preventive measures. So is it okay to take Tylenol or ibuprofen before, during, and after the vaccination?
Sure. So I don't generally recommend pre-medicating or taking it before your vaccination. Okay. There's some studies that it's a little conflicting, but there's some theoretical the concern that it may blunt your immune response if you don't get that initial kind of cytokine kind of switch going on. So I don't recommend pre-medicating or pre-treating with ibuprofen or Tylenol or other NSAIDs. But if you develop symptoms after, if you get fevers or muscle aches or headaches, you can definitely take it after your vaccine. But I would wait until after to take it.
And somebody's commenting that their family member received a vaccine and then got COVID.
Yes. So remember that these vaccines they're number one, they're not 100%, right? They're 95% effective. But what we're seeing is that a lot of people are getting the first dose and they're not in that kind of fully protective phase. And because that coincided with the holidays and basically our nationwide surge, especially our local surge here in California, a lot of people were exposed and got sick between their first and before when they were due for their second vaccine, because you're not going to be fully, get that 95% benefit until about 2 weeks after your second dose. And again, even if you get it, 2 weeks after your second dose, or it's a month later, we're not there yet because most people haven't gotten that far yet. Even if you do get COVID there, then it will generally, we think, will be mild. Okay, that's what we've been seeing. It's very mild. Either you have no symptoms or very mild symptoms, like a normal kind of cold, not something that puts you in the hospital.
So you mentioned side effects. I know they vary quite a bit. You mentioned all of the possible ones. I know my husband just received a shot. He had nothing, couldn't even feel the shot in his arm. So he's happy camper. Somebody's asking though, are side effects contagious?
No. So side effects are, again, they're the reactogenicity, right? So it's your body recognizing that protein's not supposed to be there and saying, oh my gosh, I'm sounding the alarm. Okay, so what you're feeling, the aches, the pains, the fever, again, during those first 1 to 2 days after your vaccine, you're not contagious, right? That is just your body sounding the alarm, and it feels like you're getting sick because that's what your body does normally with any other viral infection. But you're not contagious. Now, if your symptoms last 3 to 4 days after you get your vaccine, then you should be tested for COVID, because you might have COVID. It's not because the vaccine gave it to you or anything, but around that time, maybe in the week or so before, you might have been exposed and you might have gotten sick, okay? Because these side effects generally go away within a day or two. And people describe it as almost like a switch being turned off, right? You're feeling like you're getting sick, and then all of a sudden it just kind of peters out, because remember, that spike protein is gone in your body. By 3 days, it's totally gone, okay? So that switch kind of gets flipped, and people usually feel pretty good after that.
Is there going to be any issue with people who suffer from seizure disorders? Any recommendations there?
So at this point, I don't think there's any specific recommendations for people with seizures. Again, any kind of, getting sick at all can trigger seizures in some susceptible people. But because your chance of getting sick or dying from COVID is so high right now because of our disease, how much disease we have in our community, if you're going to be in a setting where you're exposed to people for your work, you can't just stay home. I would strongly recommend you get this vaccine, because I think your chance of having your seizures triggered by COVID itself is probably higher than from the vaccine. They have not seen seizures be one of those common side effects that's been reported.
How about the second dose? What do we know about side effects from the second dose?
So in general, if you've had side effects with the first dose, they may be a little bit more severe with the second dose, because it's a booster, right? So it is boosting that immune response. So it is kind of testing your immune system to say, hey, you recognize this once, and we're going to give it to you again, and kind of solidify that memory response. And so, if you had no symptoms with the first dose, because again, most people don't have anything. But if you did have symptoms of the first dose, it can be a little bit stronger with the second.
Pam, could you help me? All right, sorry about that. My battery is running low on my laptop here, so I'm hollering at Pam to come and plug me in so I don't lose you all. We have a couple more questions on side effects, so let me get those to you. And some kudos, amazing presentation, so thank you, Angelina. Really imparted very important information. No, I think it's in the bag. Thank you, Pam, I'm sorry. Okay, we talked
Okay,
about.
if you don't mind, this is Dawn jumping in. One question that really caught my attention is individuals with dementia and receiving the vaccine. Any experience with that?
Again, I don't think there's been any specific clinical trials. Have been vaccinated for the nursing home patients, skilled nursing facility patients in the past few weeks as well. Generally, for elderly patients or patients who maybe their life expectancy is less than a year or so, it definitely should be an individualized decision to get that vaccine. But I wouldn't expect that any of these vaccinations would cause any decline in cognitive function or anything like that over any significant that you could tell or that would last for any amount of time. So that's a great question. Again, I don't think it's been specifically studied, but certainly these vaccines have been rolled out to those kind of more vulnerable populations in nursing homes, other community living situations, and they haven't really noticed any problems with that.
Dr. Kranziun, we have a question about radiation therapy. So I'm assuming that would be similar to people who are immunosuppressed in terms of safety.
Yeah, I mean, I think, radiation therapy usually now is very specific or, located to one area of the body. Even patients with cancer are definitely, considered on that kind of immunosuppressed list. And we do recommend that everyone, with cancer, whether you're getting actively treated or not, does get vaccinated. Again, these are not live virus vaccines. They're not going to make you sick with the disease. And, we want to give your immune system the best chance we can at fighting this off should it encounter COVID in the near future. So yes, from my understanding, there's no restriction on that, and it should not affect your response.
And could you address the timing factor? I know there's been a lot of public debate about the second dose and timing, and should we delay it? So what would be your recommendation if unforeseen circumstances delay the timing, that either 3 or 4 week timing of the second dose?
Yeah.
What's your recommendation?
So the reason they picked 3 weeks, because that is the earliest kind of, again, to get that boost response from the immune system, you have to have that primary response kind of completed. And then 3 weeks is about the earliest time you can boost. Okay, so they say plus or minus, 3 or 4 days. So 18 days, 20 days after your first vaccination, that's when that boost can happen. Now, with other vaccines, we boost it, 6 months later, 8 months later, so delaying it is probably not going to be a problem in terms of, getting that boost or that boost not being as effective, but you're not going to get that full protection of the vaccine until 2 weeks after your boost. And so if you're waiting that long and our COVID pandemic is raging right now and you're being exposed to possible COVID people all the time because you're out and about or, because of your job, we want the studies were designed to get that full immunity fastest. And so, again, waiting, while it's not a problem per se, it will just delay the time till you get to that 94, 95% effectiveness.
So there's also some reports in the media about deaths in, someone has commented here, particularly in Norway. So can you talk a little bit about that sort of background noise factor and how that affects?
The paper in Norway was actually retracted because they didn't actually compare it to their usual rate of death before vaccinations. And so they didn't, again, really do a good study because they just said, oh, after we vaccinated, this many people died, but it turns out, in the month before, just as many people died except without the vaccine. So it was not a significant difference, okay? And then there was recently, I know the news media picked up on an elderly gentleman who died in Placer County He was 92 with some significant comorbidities. He was currently in a SNF because he was being treated for an active infection, and then he got the vaccine and then passed. But again, when we're talking about our older folks, their chance of dying from any cause is higher than a younger person, right? And any kind of stress, if you get sick from actual COVID, or again, maybe that immune response from the vaccine could cause some stress on the body, which again, when you're over 90 or so, any little thing can kind of push you over and make your homeostasis kind of fail, and lead to you dying. So again, at this point, because we know that those patients are so vulnerable, I mean, we are certainly targeting our vaccinations at the elderly population and our super seniors. And really, we haven't been seeing these kind of patterns. Most people do totally fine with it. I think it's just, again, when the news media latches onto these, they don't really get the full picture. And if you talk to any of their doctors, they'll be like, well, he was already really sick anyway, he had a lot of comorbidities, it's probably not related to the vaccine.
So Dr. Kranziun, I have some great questions coming up. If we go over a few minutes, are you okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, we've got some fantastic questions. And again, some of these that have to do with logistics, everyone, we just can't cover today, but I will record them for the next time when we do talk about logistics. So some more questions up your alley, in terms of allergic reactions. A question about dermal fillers, and also someone who had Guillain-Barré as a child. Any contraindications there?
Yeah, so dermal filler. Interesting question. That was in the Moderna trial. That was the only kind of allergic reaction that got some signal that they reported in the trial. And there are 2 cases of face swelling in the area where you got your fillers in your lip or your under your eyes or something like that. And so that can happen with any vaccination, because again, it just kind of stimulates the immune response to like be on high alert for things that are foreign, and dermal fillers are foreign, right? They're foreign substances that are in your body. And so you can get some local swelling and redness at that time. And usually we just treat it with like steroids or something like that to help calm it down. So it definitely has been reported. I personally haven't heard about anyone in our clinic getting that type of reaction. So it's again, we'll see how common that is as that keeps rolling out, but any vaccine has been reported to cause that type of reaction. And then with Guillain-Barré, interestingly, there's a whole society about Guillain-Barré. They have the Guillain-Barré Society, and their actual recommendations are to get the vaccine, because we know that getting COVID itself is a higher risk of getting Guillain-Barré than with the vaccines. There definitely have been many case reports of that happening. And a history of Guillain-Barré in the past, again, they're not recommending that you do not get the vaccine. So they actually say, yes, you should still get the vaccine because COVID is so dangerous right now.
And how about people who have mold allergies?
So allergies to things in the environment or to foods, or bee stings or things like that, are not associated with increased risk of reaction to these vaccines. The people who've had reactions tend to have a history of anaphylaxis, so full body immediate reactions to medications, usually IV medications or some other types of medication. So not just like I took a medicine, I got a little rash, or my tummy didn't feel so good. These were kind of immediate. I took a medicine and within 30 minutes, my lips started swelling, my face started swelling, I couldn't breathe, I passed out, they had to resuscitate me in the hospital kind of reaction, okay? So environmental things, asthma, food allergies are not related. There's nothing in this vaccine is very simple. It's that lipid membrane, so the cholesterol, fats stabilized by polyethylene glycol, with that messenger RNA on the inside. There's no food products, there's nothing else in there.
So someone with celiac disease would fall in that same category you've just described.
Exactly. There's no wheat or gluten in this at all.
Okay. And I think you covered this, but the second dose, you did describe sometimes the reaction will be a little bit stronger.
Correct, yeah.
Okay. So we covered that already. Anything related to blood thinners? Any cautions there?
No, yeah, we're not recommending anyone stop their blood thinners for this vaccination. You may be a little bit more prone to have a little bit bleeding at your injection site, like with any, any needle getting stuck in you, but you should continue your anticoagulation.
So we have a family of providers who all received the vaccination. We're very excited about it, but they have sustained redness and itching on their arm at the injection site. And this was received on January 11th. So should that be looked at?
Generally, if it should go away, I would anticipate within about 2 weeks.
Okay.
We think that is a delayed T cell response. Okay, so similar, like almost like a poison oak response, where you get that contact, and then hours to days to weeks later, you get this redness in that local spot. If it's itchy or bothersome, usually I say put some a topical steroid on there, try ice packs. You can try antihistamine pills, over-the-counter antihistamines if it's itchy, but it should go away within 2 weeks. If it doesn't go away within 2 weeks, or if it's getting really way bigger and spreading up your arm, there's concern for infection, then definitely you should get it looked at. But a little red spot in one spot, I'm not too worried about. It will go away.
Okay. Lots of kudos, lots of thanks. Thank you for the photos, the pictures rather, really helped people understand. So just want to be sure I'm sharing that with you. We have Dr. Tatum on the call, who's oh my God, my word finding, pulmonologist, and says A++++. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Let's see. Once fully vaccinated, should someone continue to get tested periodically?
So I would say now yes, I would still recommend to keep doing those routine surveillance, because again, we don't know that question about the asymptomatic carrier. Can you still grow it in your nose and transmit it? So I think, again, if you're, one of those, in the skilled nursing facility or something like that, where you're able to get tested regularly, I would continue doing that. I would not stop that program at this point, because we don't know. And I think that'd be terrific use to gather more data in our community. We say, hey, I got vaccinated, but I still have a little in my nose. I feel totally fine, but I was still grew it in my nose, which again, the vaccine won't cause you to do. Okay, so the testing, I think, is still worthwhile at this point. Maybe in the next few months, if we know that, hey, the vaccine is really good at preventing that, we don't see people getting, that virus growing in their nose and being able to spread it, then maybe we can stop. But I think right now it's premature. I would still recommend to get regular testing if you're able to.
And on testing, again, a test is not required before the vaccination.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's we want to reserve that for people who need that. Okay, let me just get somebody's asking, when you get a second dose and still get infected with a milder COVID, because we understand that's possible, it's not 100%, is the isolation protocol still the same as those who haven't had the vaccine at all?
Yes, we're treating it exactly the same at this point.
So it doesn't matter if it's mild or severe or anything else?
Nope, it's still 10 days after symptoms or 14 days after a positive test.
Okay, we have a few questions here that I think are going to take a little too long to answer, like, again, the variant and sequencing and so on. Maybe we'll have you come back on at a later time. And let me just scan again really quickly to see what else. There's some general vaccine hesitancy that maybe we can wrap up with this sort of general comment from you, Dr. Kranzian, around what are the long-term effects? How do we know what this will do to my body over 5, 10, 15 years? Also concerns about the speed at which this vaccine, which you addressed earlier, was developed. Should we trust the CDC and all of the FDA and all of the review bodies? There's some definite, mistrust that's been fostered over this last few years. And just sort of what would you say in response to folks who have those sorts of concerns that are more general as opposed to real specific?
Yeah, I mean, I think, vaccine hesitancy has been an ongoing problem that, again, a lot of pediatricians are quite familiar with. But we've been using vaccines as a tool, again, for hundreds of years, and our science and research has only gotten better since the polio vaccine, over 50 years ago. We understand vaccines way better than then, and there's if you do good science, and the U.S. has a lot of great scientists, that a lot of those concerns can be alleviated. I definitely understand that people are often fear what they don't understand, and I think this is my goal in trying to present a lot of this science and the science behind these vaccines, is to really make sure that everyone can really understand. You take the time to understand where this comes from. It's not just being made up. There's really no nefarious purpose. I mean, people have dedicated their lives to creating this technology to just for this moment, to meet this moment in human history. I think in terms of trusting our government institutions, a lot of that trust in the past 4 years has been kind of harmed, I would say. And certainly now if you look at the picture of Dr. Fauci in the news in the past couple of weeks, he seems much happier and much able to really freely speak, about what's been going on. And again, I think, the people who have designed this, the people behind the scenes, are not political. They have no motivation other than to help people and to really do their best job. And they've dedicated their lives to this. So I'm quite confident. And this vaccine has gotten more research than most medicines that people take every day for years, for their blood pressure or cholesterol or things like that. There's been more scrutiny of this and the science than many medicines people take for other reasons, and take for longer term. And the fact that, again, this is just a one-time thing. Again, your immune system, it doesn't work like that with vaccines. We don't see things further down the road. It's really, we see immediate side effects or we don't, and again, I think, we know that COVID, well, it feels better sometimes to kind of not do anything, right? And not take that, oh, I said I'd get a vaccine, I said I'd get vaccinated, and then this happened, right? And you say, well, I'm just not going to take the vaccine. I'm going to feel better not doing anything. But then you get sick with COVID and die, and so I think right now, most of our vaccine preventable illnesses aren't this immediate, right? We're used to vaccinating against, measles, which maybe caused an outbreak at Disneyland, once every 10 years or something like that, or, tetanus, which is pretty rare for someone to step on a rusty nail these days, and if they do, they get treated right away. And all these kind of vaccine preventable illnesses, because our vaccines are so good at what they do, we don't see we don't see polio anymore. We don't see kids being paralyzed. We don't see, congenital rubella or chickenpox that causes, permanent damage to newborn babies when they get transmitted from maternal infections. And right now we have this COVID is now a vaccine preventable disease, and you have that opportunity to use this amazing gift that people have dedicated their entire lives to creating, and to use our knowledge of this modern scientific era to prevent disease and to protect yourself and your family and your community. And so I would really encourage everyone to really, just kind of keep all that in mind, because I know there's so much anxiety and fear of the unknown, and we don't know what the future is going to hold. I mean, who knew a year ago I'd be giving this talk, right? And that my kids would not be in school, and I'd be wearing, full PPE for every patient I saw in my clinic, where before we could hold hands and shake and, and hug and not have to worry about this. And so, the future is always unknown, but I think, people, you can take that opportunity and that choice to really change it for the better. And so I would encourage you, again, if you have any questions, you can feel free to email me, reach out, definitely talk with your doctors. Your doctors are stressed out too. Some are more or less knowledgeable about these vaccines because it takes a lot of time and bandwidth and a lot of hours of reading things outside of your daily clinic. And, so a lot of doctors may not be as knowledgeable, but I think everyone can agree that this is really important, and we're all working hard to get these vaccines into arms.
Thank you so much. More kudos coming in the question box, and John is as a clinical pharmacist and I just had to tell you this, a former clinical project cardiovascular scientist for J&J. Outstanding presentation. So John, I may be getting in touch with you. All right. Well, we have gone a little over, so let me go ahead and wrap up. Thank you, Dr. Kranziun. I feel like I've been in a grand rounds And I hope that we can have you back sometime. This has been a fantastic presentation.
My pleasure. And again, I'm so happy to get the word out. We need to get as many people vaccinated as possible. So anytime. And thank you so much for the invitation.
Your passion comes through the screen. So if we could go to the next slide. We'll wrap up now, everybody. I'm sorry if we didn't get to your questions. I probably should have scheduled this for a 2-hour session, but I know Dr. Kranz-Yoon is very busy. Resources, I'm not going to go over these. They're here for your future information. Go ahead. And I just got confirmation, actually, this slide is not been updated from last night. I got confirmation late last night. Next week will be Department of Social Services talking about logistics in residential care, adult day programs, and other questions related to the vaccine rollout. So be sure to circle February 3. The following week, we'll move that down, will be, we're hoping to put together something on vaccines and cultural empathy and sensitivity. So we're just getting that organized. And then sometime in February, I can't promise it'll be the 10th, we will have a session with Department of Aging and possibly some other partners talking about future planning for a return to in-center services. So just a little preview of what's coming up. We'll continue to host these weekly until probably middle of February. All right, next slide, please.
Oops, hang on.
And this is my closing slide, usually thought for the week, but this week I am including, along with my thought for a week, the inspiration for the week. And honestly, Dr. Kranz-Yoon and I did not plan this in advance, but you will notice that we have the exact 2 women featured in today's talk. And that was just because we are of like minds, I think. And I'm calling it Inspiration of the Week because I want to point out 3 things that are inspirational to me. Number 1, women in science. Let's give a shout out for that. Number 2, an immigrant from Hungary, persistently pursuing mRNA research for 30 years in the United States, and an African-American kid from South Carolina who has led much of the effort at the National Institute on Health on COVID-19. So my inspiration for the week, I leave that for you. Next slide. And I know many of you look forward to the thought of the week, so I didn't want to skip it. Does the name Linus Pauling ring a bell? It may because of his anti-war stance or because he advocated for the use of vitamin C as a curative for cancer and was greatly debated in the science and cultural discussions of the period. But I know what he should be remembered for is his brilliance as a biochemist and the winner of the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1954. He was born at the turn of the century, came from a long lineage of Prussian farmers, grew up to be a standout student at Caltech in Pasadena, where he taught and maintained connections his entire life. And relevant to our topic today, one of his many contributions to science was determining the molecular structure of proteins, which we learn today are fundamental to our understanding of the complexities of the COVID-19 virus and how it attacks the body. We just learned that today in our masterclass. So he's quoted as saying, "Science is the search for truth. It is not a game in which one tries to beat his opponent to do harm to others." And I share this quote because science is what is leading us out of this pandemic. The incredible collaboration of scientists across the globe, dropping everything they were researching to focus on vaccines and therapeutics, which we haven't even begun talking about yet, to cure the human suffering brought on by COVID-19. So it's not about beating your scientific opponent, being the first to publish. It's about working together to beat the virus and do no harm to others. And because of the work of people like Dr. Kranz-Yoon, who is immersed in the science and treats real people in a clinic every day, and who's been kind enough to share her expertise and offer us this wonderful biology and chemistry lesson, we're closer to understanding the search for truth. So I want to thank you again, Dr. Kranz-Yoon, for the generosity of your time. And I just have to point out, everybody, Dr. Kranz-Yoon also graduated from Caltech, Dr. Linus Pauline's alma mater, before earning her medical degree. And that connection's just too fantastic to pass up. So we've gotten a little smarter today thanks to our web talk. I hope you feel the same. Until our next talk, a week from today, please stay safe out there, mask up, share your new knowledge with others, and get your vaccination when you can. We'll see you February 3rd, everyone. Take care.